So, welcome everyone to the Standard Bank National Arts Festival. And here we've got a little jazz workshop over Zoom with me old friends. It is so lovely to see you. I wish it was in the same room.
I know, right?
That would be
Yeah.
nice.
Mm.
So, I think it's been such a period of being alone and dislocated. And I just wondered how you guys are feeling more than a year on, having had quite a close brush of late, because in the early lockdown last year, it felt like we were all flooded with creativity and a way of coping. And I just wondered how you guys are feeling more than a year on now.
We're just flooded with COVID now, really.
Yeah, I don't know. It's tricky. I think slightly confused maybe about what happens from here on. I think that's the main thing is like how is this going to change things? I'm not quite sure. The creativity has worn off slightly, I think.
Yeah. Well, I'll let you go first.
No, well, I don't really know how to answer that because it's like I think everyone might have the same answer. I think everyone's just a bit kind of like bewildered at this point. Like deer in the headlights, not quite sure what's going to happen. Yeah.
Well, I think I think maybe I was more bewildered in the beginning by the scope of it all. I think, but like you say, I think in the beginning we had a lot more energy.
And ideas.
And ideas and out of that energy and those ideas came at least 3 different projects, which was great. And I think of late in the last, because I think we all expected that we'd be out of this by now. We didn't expect that the Cape Town Jazz Fest, for instance, would be cancelled again, and various other things. We thought we'd be sort of back in the swing of it. So now it's almost like you're just sitting waiting to find out kind of is there going to be school next week or not, and I know just for us, obviously we approach these things very differently. My energy and creativity is at some point was dipped to like an all-time low because it's just both of the issue for us, I guess, and we're very fortunate. We're in a much better position than a lot of our peers in that we managed to secure some funding for these projects that we did fairly early on. So on top of these sort of career-related or existential issues that we have, we don't thankfully have major financial issues, which is obviously that makes it a whole lot worse. So at least we can we're safe in the knowledge that we can pay our bills, which is great. I mean, because there are musicians who are really struggling month to month just to do that. And then of course creativity takes a back seat, in that sense. But for us, I guess it's, for me personally, the thought of coming out of this and going back to the hustle, it's a tough thought to have after stepping back, because I don't think anyone at any point in their career would ever take a step back for a year and a half and actually be able to look at what it is that they've done under such a microscope and then continue in exactly the same way. It's things have to change, and
and it's also I was just in Switzerland now, and it's also a little bit weird to because it actually happened that when I left there, they had just opened everything up. They had opened up all the bars. Most people have had their vaccination, going down to like 20. They're starting to do teenagers now, so it's all opening up. And I came back here and Uncle Cyril's announcing that we're going into a hard lockdown again. It's like, then things get a little bit weird.
Well, you came back and immediately
Well,
got
then,
COVID.
yes, I know. But I mean, but that's kind of weird as well. That kind of freaked me out a bit because I was like, oh, here we go. Like they pretty much on the year mark, they were sorting things out. I'm not quite sure what's going to happen here.
I mean, I'd wondered also about your Together Alone series, which was just so astoundingly surprising. It just felt like there was such wonderful connections. It was almost like a story of musicians you've worked with in different projects, and I'm sure people got involved. It was just such remarkable combinations of people, and from dissonant to extraordinarily beautiful. And I just was wondering how the choosing people and people coming together in that kind of really dislocated early part of last year's lockdown was musically and how you directed it in a way. It felt like you must have stepped into a film director's shoes almost.
No, I didn't direct it really, other than to just give some written guidelines, because the only way that such an experiment could work is if people were working to the same script. I guess it's easier to talk about it in a film sense, as if you were having 10 actors improvise a scene and there was no script, but there was a theme, kind of bringing them together, but they weren't able to hear what the other was saying. I guess that's what made it interesting and special. And I think this would be a whole other 5-hour Zoom call, because Dominic Landolf, the tenor player, actually, he made a comment, and during the process, it was a great process. For me, it was a long process, obviously, and it wasn't about. I thought that beforehand I would choose the people that I would put together before hearing what everyone did, and as soon as I started listening to the recordings, that went out the window. I had to go with what the music said. It had to be who musically fits with the other, and some of the results. There are some videos that are scary. I'm still convinced that Shane, Ayanda, and Sisonke
they had a rehearsal.
I swear they had a rehearsal. Yeah, but Dominic said at some point he said he made a comment about how we don't necessarily need to be in the same room. Or I can't remember exactly what he said, but in a sense it was both very jazz and very anti-jazz in what he said, because some of these improvisations, if you didn't tell people under what conditions they were recorded, they would say, man, listen to how these guys are speaking to each other. Listen to how they listen to each other and respond. And meanwhile, every track was recorded in absolute isolation. So it speaks very much to on what level do people listen sometimes when they improvise collectively in jazz, because I know I've been part of collective improvisations where everyone's in the same room that sounded less than half as cohesive, So that would be an interesting separate study in itself, actually what is it that creates that dialogue,
Just that knowing that other people will be there, just performing alone in a room, but feeling the absence of people and thinking about that just makes it really different for people.
Yeah, well, also, I guess these are all great musicians, but there were varying degrees of that. I guess some people felt, because they said actually afterwards when I asked some individuals about it, they said they felt quite exposed or insecure, like a little bit, and then you feel the need to overplay, as opposed to some people who naturally can hear what might happen once it's all together, and they allow room for that. And so it's like and I think people might do it differently if they did it a second time. Being alone, having the same instructions, I might do it differently, actually.
Yeah.
You learn something about yourself and your own nakedness.
Yeah, well, it's ironically, people, even though there was nothing else to listen to, might possibly have listened better. If that makes any sense, you know what I mean? I think that's part of it. But and I think obviously horn players. Then if you get into different instruments and how guys on different instruments perceive music and perceive space, that's a whole other conversation, because horn players are very much used to stepping back and not playing for 3/4 of an entire gig.
Yeah.
Whereas piano players, drummers, bass players are not.
Not so much. Yeah.
So it's interesting how those spaces or lack of spaces come about according to what instrument you play.
Yeah.
And I wanted to also ask you about your House on the Hill project. Like, how did people respond to not having a piano? Because it was just amazing seeing the Rhodes, your old Rhodes, come up in so many different contexts and so many different sounds and the way people played it. Were you limited by the size of the room? I was wondering.
No. I think it was. Sorry, you wanted.
No. I wasn't. I think when it comes to Rhodes, I think generally piano players have a respect for an instrument like Rhodes. They respect it because it's like also an acoustic, but a very different, like a piano. Like they would have the same respect for a piano, you know. But I think a lot of people just aren't used to being on a Rhodes. You have to play a Rhodes slightly differently. I didn't realize that until somebody said it. It's a different instrument because you can't cluster things like you would normally do on a piano. I never really thought of that because of the frequency, because it's so rich in its frequency.
Yeah, Rhodes is like Rhodes. The sound of a Rhodes is so pleasing that even a terrible piano player like me can sound alright on a Rhodes.
Well, it is.
It was both a purposeful sonic decision because you don't hear a lot of music coming out of South Africa that's Rhodes driven. So we wanted to have a slightly different sonic approach to the whole thing for piano players. It was a technical decision because to record we only have limited channels, so to record an acoustic piano plus to have a drum kit, the bleed issues are significant.
Much more difficult, yeah.
So that was a massive part of it.
Yeah.
Because we do record the Rhodes with 2 channels. We use a microphone, but there's a line directly out. So then if you need, you can have a clean line with no bleed. And I think that if you give most piano players a choice, although South African piano players are quite resilient in the fact that they approach keyboard with, without any horror like European piano players do. If you give a European a keyboard for a gig, they're like, what is this? Where is the piano?
Yeah.
We don't have pianos.
Yeah.
We don't have venues with pianos. So in general, and other recordings that have been done in South Africa, other audiovisual recordings have been done with upright pianos, and some of them haven't sounded that great. So I think if you give a lot of piano players an option, look, it's keyboard or Rhodes. I think for the most part, at least a Rhodes is still a piano. It still produces its own sound. It's an instrument, you know. So there were a number of reasons, but I think purposefully for us, we spoke about it and we were like, let's make this thing sound different on many fronts, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, the quality of sound that you got was really beautiful. So was that just you and Peter and Romy? I'd wondered if you were art director, blending your amazing visual skills, or was it a collaborative effort?
Yeah, it was do you want to speak about the audio first?
Well, speak about the arts.
The visual, obviously coming from Marcus and I make quite a good team, I guess, in that respect, because I'm a Googler. I research things. I read threads and threads and threads of people who are trying to do the same thing at a limited budget. He doesn't, but we've got we've got the same idea of what we would like. The general feel of it was definitely me. I wanted, because it was online and there's so much stuff online, I wanted something that didn't look like it was a live concert because it's not, you know. So I rather the very close roving cameras that we are using and the statics, I guess, were my decision because of my incessant Googling, and because I wanted it to look, if it's online, then show something that you wouldn't see at a live gig, which is extreme close up, quite moody. You know, that was, I guess, what I wanted and what you wanted, but maybe couldn't put into
words.
Into equipment necessarily. So that was definitely, and the way the room looks, I think, was also. I guess it's safe to say that the visual was mostly decisions probably made by me, but that we both had agreed on. And then the audio, I don't know anything about audio. I don't know how to record anything. So Marcus was pretty much the decision making on the audio, with help, of course, from Peter Oret, who was.
Yeah, I mean, just one more comment on the visual side of things was that something that Thandi Ntuli said actually when we first spoke about her doing an episode. I mean, she ended up being the first episode, and you know, Thandi's she's quite thoughtful and thinks about a lot of things that maybe perhaps a little bit more than a lot of the other musicians around, and she was agreeable to doing this because she said that it felt more like creating content than trying to reproduce a live concert, which which is what it is. So you see these things online, and we haven't really been super successful, I think, at selling tickets for online jazz concerts during this whole time. And it's not, I know for myself, obviously you go back to YouTube and you watch those classic live concerts that you love, but I think people became very quickly saturated of just a shot of a stage and musicians playing, because we all know a major part of this thing that makes it special is being in a room with someone, being close to them, feeling that energy. And I think that Rome's idea, and we had actually some very good tips from Damir, actually, who assisted us with, have maybe perspectives and how to shoot at a certain distance from something else to create depth and all of these kind of things. But I think the idea of shooting close, getting right in there, which I also love as a amateur photographer. I love getting close in and making people uncomfortable. And I think that I think that's what's cool about it, is that the music, it does sound great, and of course, in terms of the EQing of this room that we have, the room sounds good, and then the EQing of it, Peter Orette is one of the best in the business, and so once we've tracked it, myself and Leander, who's our tenant, who's the engineer on the actual gig, we send it to Pete and he EQs it, and then I'll sit and do balances and mixes and that, and I think the sound that we're getting is very warm, and it's very intimate. So you combine that warmth with those close-up shots, with the room, with the lighting that we're trying to create, and I think people have a different experience than they would looking at a stage with a bunch of musicians.
Yeah, it's meant to be
those little clips of musicians, just where you caught them often talking about how they got into music, or it was lovely. One of my all-time favorite trumpet players, Sydney, just speaking about his mother being a tuba player and Africa collapsing laughing. It was just a beautiful moment.
We've actually, sorry, sweets.
No, go on.
I'll just go on there. One of the ideas that we had was to record the music and then to record a full interview. And we're not yet sure what we're going to do with those full interviews. So what you see in each episode, which we've started to introduce slightly more of, because we realized that it's a good way of connecting with the musicians as well. We've got probably anywhere from 30 minutes to the people who speak slightly less, to Becky Koza. We've got a full hour and a half of interview, and we're not sure yet. Gwen Ansell had some very good ideas about eventually handing these things over for archive purposes with some of the universities, or we could release a series later on that is just purely the musicians speaking about what it is they do, which is fascinating, telling stories. So those clips that we've chosen really are just us trying to give people a better idea of, like, nobody knew Sydney's mum played tuba, and it somehow it does connect you more to the musician than it's actually amazing. We've all known these musicians for years, and they're sitting on this couch and telling us stuff, and we're like, what?
We don't know their stories. Yeah, we actually don't know their stories.
And we've all been in kind of workshops in Makhanda, and there's eager beaver students, and they're hanging in there and they're wanting the magic secret spice to the magic hidden chord, or how to create a sound, and everyone just gives the same answer. Well, like, play long notes. They actually just tell their life story, and sometimes maybe you need to be a bit older or maybe that's the journey, is realizing that everyone creates their own sound and finds their people and what they're going to do in this thing.
Well, it also has a lot to do with the fact that all the musicians on the couch, Marcus is the perfect person to be interviewing people, because there's a direct link to everyone, and if there's not a direct link, there's a very close one. So even like Bratemba Makhanda, we don't know him very well, but Marcus would have played with somebody who he has played with, and as soon as that link is established, somebody feels comfortable enough to talk about themselves and their history and stuff, which is different, I think, to somebody who doesn't know, may know a lot about the person, but there's no personal link to somebody. I think it's a bit, that's why we've managed to get honesty on that couch, I think, like some openness from people.
I think as well, what really helps is maybe what makes this series really, for me, quite cool, is because we are both musicians, and so the way we shoot, the way we edit, and the questions we ask, and the way we relate to the guys featured, is we're on the same page. So there's no misunderstandings. There's no
we're in the struggle.
There's none of those. Well, yeah, there's none of those questions that. Those questions you get every time you're interviewed by someone who doesn't know a lot about music, which you kind of you roll your eyes and go, okay, here we go again. You know, it's nice to be able to relate on the same level, and then to be able to even just doing the multicam and actually editing the music as it goes, to be able to crop and edit with the music, to do it musically, it for us it makes so much sense. And when you look at it, you know, if a drummer does a little fill that's really cool with the brushes, but nobody sees it, then half the time nobody hears it. And it's amazing when you just show these things, how the ear suddenly goes, oh wow, that was really cool, as opposed to completely missing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And your duo that's being featured now, this festival, did that come out of that concert you guys did together? I see Gwen billed it as a rare duo performance, but I've heard you guys together for some years. So how did this one come about?
Yeah, that was in the time when we still had ideas and creativity in the beginning.
We still have ideas, okay? We have
ideas. We have ideas. But that was the time when we didn't, we weren't earning anything, and we spent like a week in our garage putting beats together. Was it more than a week? It was. I'm glad we did it. I remember it was a lot of work.
Basically, in a nutshell, like if the way that House on the Hill started, right, was through just before lockdown. I had an old sound card, a Focusrite 8-channel sound card, which I bought 12 years ago, not knowing why, but I bought it. I had some money and I bought it, and it's a very good sound card. So just before lockdown, I took it out and I started thinking, why don't we try and record one or two things here? I needed to invest in some secondhand mics and a few things. Keenan Ahrens asked if, because they were supposed to go to Switzerland with Romy already last year. Yeah. He said he would be the guinea pig and on the first one. So there's on his YouTube channel, there's the first video we ever made, which was his concert, the trio, which we recorded with basically some of the gear that we still use, but we used phones and one decent camera, I think. And from that, we realized, hey, we can actually maybe do something here, And then while all of that gear was out and everything was plugged in, that's when Romy and I decided, because we don't play together enough.
No.
And that's when we did the first concert, which was just duo. I know we overdubbed one or two little harmonies, and put them in. And then while that was happening, I was just thinking about some of the other material, like the Language 12 or some of the older material that's more groove oriented, that requires more of a sound and an ensemble thing. And then next thing we knew, we had we'd got all these percussion, things that we had all out onto the ground. And we had a few pots and pans, like an old frying pan and some mixing bowl and just various little strange things. And we started experimenting. I mean, the bass drum sound that we used for this entire project is basically was a stick that was wrapped up with cloth and then bashed on the double bass body. So that's the bass drum, and the snare drum was anything from shakers to little fingers on the actual bass itself. Yeah. We hit the trumpet with little bamboo sticks. We basically, if you watch this Out of the Loop thing, you'll see, because we show all of that. so people can see what it is that we actually used. And then, so we were in there for a good, like Romy says, like a week or two. We were filming. We filmed ourselves just playing the basic skeleton, so duo with click track. Then we started layering layer upon layer of percussion, which is hard when you're not a drummer. It's very hard. So I had to go in, obviously, in post and fix a lot of things and try and make them loop nicely and all of that. So it was just a very long process. And then we actually got to the point where we had almost fully mixed it. And Romy started to work on the visual editing. And it was about a third of the way visually done, I would say. And about 3/4 of the way done on the audio side last year in probably May. And then we did nothing. And then we just sat on it. And then Alan asked if anyone has any content. So I was like, we do. And then he said, cool. And I said, cool. And then we looked at it and we were like, we've got a lot of work to do, you know? And at that point we started, and thankfully that was when we were starting to recover from COVID. So we pushed the whole thing by about a week or two. So we were just able to finish. Hey, Leila, I think like we delivered on the last possible day that we could deliver.
Yeah, it was quite a bit of work.
But it's an interesting. I don't know if you have anything more to say on it. It is an interesting.
Well,
It's an interesting project.
It's kind of cool, yeah. And the reason why this percussion thing that you said, and Marcus and I are very different in this regard. I think I've got my personality type is to go. I need to make sure I've got everything together, and then I'll put it to someone, or I'll apply for something, Marcus is exactly the opposite. So he sells the idea before we know how to do it. Basically, that's what happened with House on the Hill. That's what happened with this percussion thing. You had said yes, and we hadn't edited it. Yeah.
That's what happened with Bomb Shelter Beast.
That's what happened with Bomb Shelter Beast. So I guess in that combined with my incessant Googling is what has made us do all these things, which is kind of cool. It's a good combination.
Actually, remind me, I was in that one little interview with Tandy in her House of the Hill concert. There's that moment where she says, I think most artists thrive on being placed somewhere new and uncomfortable. I thought that was such a lovely take, you know. So you definitely landed on your feet. But I just hope that people who haven't checked out those videos go onto Marcus Wyatt's YouTube channel. Is probably the easiest way, and follow those projects.
Yeah, for that one, and then obviously House on the Hill has its own channel as well. You can find all those gigs there. The Alone Together series is on my channel. But yeah, it's actually, in that sense, it's been really cool. We can at least, I'm one of the few musicians that I know who hasn't really written much new material or anything during lockdown. A lot of people have creatively created a lot of new material and written a whole bunch of things. I haven't really done that. Rome's maybe neither. But we've explored a totally different side of things. You know, like the improvisation things, and then visual things, and now this project, which we're talking about doing a follow up to, using like sounds of birds and just opening up different angles and different avenues, because there is obviously music everywhere, and it's just whether you hear it or not, you know.
We've been fortunate in that we've been able to as well. That's, I guess, also the thing
in
COVID is we've had the facilities to be able to explore, like that garage downstairs that is a rehearsal space, you know. I guess that's what has happened for a lot of musicians, is that they don't have the access or the facilities. So we've been lucky enough to have those things. So it's been kind of cool to.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. And to, you know, that was probably for me the saddest thing about the whole pandemic in South Africa, is knowing that there were peers out there who you know, people were so quick to say to musicians, just play online, you know, and develop your skills, and just put stuff out online, and you can make money. And the reality is that you don't really make money, you know, unless you're super famous. And then some people who might be piano players don't have an instrument, or other people who are horn players, they don't even have a microphone.
Have place to practice. Or
Well, they,
too noisy.
or just don't even have a decent microphone. So you're asking people to just put stuff online, but if you don't translate the sound that you have in such a way that you want people to experience it, it can be very off-putting, and it doesn't represent what you have. You know what I mean? So it's a lot harder than people think to just put your music online,
But I think what has been good though in the COVID thing is that because musicians weren't making any money, but they wanted to do stuff. So suddenly there were those calls for funding flying around, from the NAC and all of that. And actually when we were applying for House on the Hill, and I was looking at various things, including film foundations and all of that, you realize that there's a lot going on. There's actually a lot that we can apply to. I think musicians have been so used to doing it on our own without any assistance or relying on other people to call us, that in this time, and it didn't just start with COVID, people have been offering funding for the longest time, and maybe it's taught us something about, if we can, putting in paperwork, proposals, and getting a lot of people have gotten funding over the last 2 years, actually, from organizations that have always given funding. So I think that's been cool as well to learn that. I didn't know that.
Yeah, no, I'm terrible at writing proposals.
But it's there, actually. It's there if you can do it,
Yeah, I mean, I think that's obviously a skill as well that we've had to try to learn, and it's still something that eludes me is proposal writing, the art of the narrative, which is still a mystery. Having a good story to sell a story that might not even be necessarily related to the good story that you had to sell it in the first place. It's a whole different aspect of the music business that they say nothing about when they're training you as a musician.
Absolutely.
And
you don't have to do it on your own.
That's a problem.
You actually don't have to. There are guys that have been amazing. Like Mandla Mlangeni has always amazed me. He always is writing to people and trying to find people who will fund things. And I mean, he's so industrious. I think it's taught. I think COVID has been good in that respect. People have maybe become a bit more industrious in the way they think.
The hustle has to be deeper.
Yeah.
Interesting arguments on, Marcus, you've spoken before about sort of the difficulty of selling your many projects to recording companies or finding the right place. I remember at one point you said you always tick the box other, because it's hard to box your own music, right?
Yeah. Other is the best. When they give you, to describe your music, you're supposed to use one word.
Yes.
And and to preview your music, you get 30 seconds. It's like, the gong hasn't finished ringing off it yet in the 30 seconds before the first chord is hit. So I guess the whole online aspect of music has really coming from an era before the internet. Online, you know what I mean? Like it's kids grow up now, and it's par for the course, and it's a scary world, like, in that sense.
Well, that's where the confusion is setting in.
Yeah, but those are whole other 5-day workshops on how to sell yourself on social media and all of those things. But we are, like Romy said, we're fortunate that we can continue to create at the moment artistically, doing what it is that we want to do without having to answer to a guy in a suit and tie who really doesn't get it, and that's obviously a blessing, Okay, hi, I'm Marcus Wyatt.
I'm Romy Brauteseth.
And catch us in duo. You'll see several versions of us in our small performance called Out of the Loop. Do you want to say something about it?
Not really. Yeah.
Okay. It's basically organically farmed beats that we've used all sorts of hybrid percussion to create loops. So catch us on the NAF website, on the Standard Bank Youth Jazz Festival program online from today.